Okay, so if you're just tuning in now, perhaps you're surfing in the program or you just joined us by computer or by phone, we do have Daniel Fiverson, who is an astrological intuitive, and he practices what's called evolutionary astrology, and he's been a student of astrology and metaphysical since the conjunction of Uranus and Pluto and Virgo in the late 60s. Wow. After being introduced to the I Ching and Tarot and reading Autobiography of Yogi, this altered Daniel's understanding of spirituality and religion. And he was increasingly attracted to spiritual teachers who worked with intuitive development and self-actualization through conscious intention. Again, if you would like to get a little bit of a download on him, and you can go, while you're listening, you can go to his site for evolutionaryastrology.com, and that's the number 4, evolutionaryastrology.com. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Michele. Can you hear me?
I can.
Am
Definitely
I here?
Can.
All right.
Yeah, you're here.
I apologize.
You're here with all
I apologize for the. I apologize for the technical mix-up. I was in the wrong medium, but here we are.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, that's cool. It's been an interesting day today. We've had a lot of Siren Dreams. Yay, we can hear you. Tamara is saying, welcome, Daniel. Great that you could come join us. Yeah. So we had a lot of little technical little glitches today, a lot of little things. So I don't know what's going on, but we're all here.
Great.
If you could touch on just briefly, because we always are having new listeners, what evolutionary astrology is, and then why Pluto is looked at as so important, and then we can dive into the other stuff.
Great. That's a good start. Evolutionary astrology. Evolutionary astrology is a soul-centered perspective. We look at the lessons of the soul from lifetime to lifetime, and the reason that Pluto is so important is because Pluto actually correlates to the soul. So it is it's the gateway into the chart. When we look at Pluto, when we kind of deconstruct it, if you would, understand how it's working by sign and by house and by aspects to other planets. The entire chart unfolds because it's the bass note of the chart. If it was an orchestra, it's that boom, boom, boom. Marking the time of the chart, marking the time of the chart itself.
Okay, I love that. And then it said that it's Pluto, but it's also where it is in your house. Not only the sign, but because that's generational, but the house that it falls in. I remember last time we were on the program, you were saying that that's kind of shows where you're learning. It's kind of an activation point and gives an indication of what will be emphasized for you this lifetime.
Yes, because, think about it. If Pluto stays in a sign for 15, 17, almost 20 years, then if all we looked at was the sign, everybody would kind of be the same, and we know clearly that they're not. So in terms of Pluto, from my perspective, the house that it falls in is equally important, if not more important than the sign. And obviously they're both significant because the sign that Pluto is in gives us that generational perspective that we all bring in, the bus that we came in on, so to speak. But the house that it falls in the chart of the individual really defines where it's working for that person.
Now, in what way is working?
Pluto's the cycle of lessons that we've brought with us. So generationally, we have lessons. For instance, Leo is very creative. So the Pluto and Leo generation have a lot of creativity. It's about creative self-actualization. So they, as a generation, and I'm speaking for myself, we have, brought in a whole, kind of thought. Dan Rudger said that we basically planted the seed for the Aquarian age, if you would. Generation, the planet grows through the generations that come upon it, if you would. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Could say that again?
The planet itself is evolving through the generations that are born onto it.
Ah. Yeah. So it's and that's why they always say we come in with these soul groups, that we're learning either the same thing, maybe in different ways, or the similar thing. There's these generational emphasis that we happen to come in with, right? Right.
Yes. And then there are, if you want to take the analogy a little bit further, maybe it's like a train, and there's separate cars in each train. For the shorter time spans of each of these Pluto generations. Where was Neptune? Where was Uranus, etc. So there are kind of subdivisions in it. People who are different parts of the itinerary, if you would. I'm not quite sure how to expand that analogy, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yes. So, and what's your contention, just as a side note, the Pluto, I still look at it as a planet, but then they say that it's a subplanet or something else. Does that really matter at all?
There's no way that Pluto is sub anything. Yeah, from my perspective, it's not sub anything. Yeah, it's not sub anything. It
packs a wallop. I remember years ago I had Pluto was transiting my second house, and at the same time I had this dream about get rid of it before you have to. And so there was all this, looking at what I really need, myself as resources, money, this and that. And I've been traveling around the world, and I gathered all this stuff. I gave stuff away, and people were like, "Why?" And I said, "I'm going with this cycle. I'm going with Pluto. I am not going to be resisting and fighting Pluto." Okay,
well, you that was so wise, because you're going to go either way. You're going to go proactively, or you're going to go kicking and screaming. But Pluto takes no prisoners.
Exactly. Well, that's what at the time an astrology and metaphysical teacher of mine had said, again, Pluto takes over. You're going to go one way or the other. And I said, let's go with it and learn instead of resisting and holding on. Because I'd seen people do that years, later. And I thought, because it wasn't a bad transit for me at all. But I could see people, wanting to hold on and not grow. And, it really it has an agenda. It has what you need to have happen on a soul level. And, you're right. You can either go with it or kicking and screaming. You can flow or scream. It doesn't care. The transformation is going to be there.
Exactly.
Let's look. We had, and by the way, if people do have questions for Daniel, you can call in at 347-539-5122. Please press #1 on the keypad. That lets us know you want to get on air. Now, one of the things, and you touched on it last time you were here, and we had, questions about this, a short overview of the meaning of Pluto in the birth chart, and then what's the correlation of Pluto in each sign, just a little bit so that people know. Because I think even right now there's so much transformative energy on the planet right now, that I think people knowing...
That's an understatement. That's an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah? Tell me. Yeah?
Well, I think we all know it. The world is going through... I think this is one of the most epic times in history that we have been chosen we have chosen to be born into. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I like how you say that we've been chosen. I mean, it is... it is a very, very transformative, uprooting time, disruptive, a period of growth that we all, like you say, have chosen. We've come here to be in this energy. We are this energy. We're part of this energy.
Yes.
Work and create through it. And to me, that's also, when you say that, it's also kind of saying, getting on board with it and saying, you're here for a reason,
Well, that's such a huge discussion. I don't know where to begin. Let me kind of start at the top with my notes, and we'll kind of work into it.
Okay.
Pluto is our deepest, the soul's deepest unconscious security needs. It's our deepest emotional patterns, and it comes from it's the record of all the events of our past, all of our triumphs and tragedies are all contained, in our karmic memory. And what we're talking about literally is karma. We're talking about the cycle of lessons, that we have brought with us, or where, lifetime to lifetime, we pick up where we left off. So when we come into this lifetime, we're basically just starting out wherever it was that we were in the journey of the soul. It's what we brought with us. Pluto describes our current cycle of lessons, and we don't do a lesson a lifetime. It doesn't quite work that way. We go through whole cycles of lifetimes working on perhaps a group of lessons or a particular cluster. It's kind of hard to define because it's the spectrum is so wide. But we work on lessons over a number of lifetimes, and generally there's actually 8 primary lifetimes that we spend in any given cycle of lessons. So most of us are, somewhere within that process. We could be at the beginning, we could be at the end, or we're somewhere in the middle.
I like that. So that is Divine Mystic put in the chat, like the chrysalis who thinks it's dying and reborn as the butterfly. Yeah, Pluto does seem to have this kind of cyclical vibration, energy process to it. Would you say that's true? It seems,
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the chrysalis, the butterfly, is actually the analogy that I use. It's the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. But relative to what you said a couple minutes ago about the resistance, the emotional resistance to change, there's a joke I like to tell that the caterpillar looked up at the butterfly and said, "You'll never get me up in one of those things." So, this is what we're up against. It's human nature to hold on to what's familiar. We really don't want to change. We stay in a relationship, we stay in a job that we know doesn't work for us, but it's familiar. We're numb to the pain. We know how to deal with it. And the change, what's new or what's out there is scarier than what we're working with, or we think it is anyway. And when the pain becomes greater than the fear, we do make a change.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. So let's go through. I think you should have notes on this. I think it could be helpful, and we had a lot of emails on this. A short synopsis of the correlation of Pluto in each house sign, and I think you said the house is most important. So if we can, however you want to do that.
Pretty much, I think that if there's anybody who's listening or, even going to ever listen to this that has Pluto in more than 4 signs, they're either very young or very, very old. Basically, we're looking at between Cancer and Scorpio. So, there's almost nobody on the planet anymore with Pluto and Gemini, and the Pluto and Sagittarius, and certainly the Pluto and Capricorn people are quite young. So we're working with that's why the houses are so important. But I'm going to go through all 12 houses because from an evolutionary astrology perspective, Michele, it's important to understand that when I look at a chart, the planet, the sign, and the house are the same archetype. So if I'm looking at Mars, or I'm looking at the first house, or I'm looking at the house that's ruled by Aries, wherever Aries in the chart, that's giving me the same information. And generally, you see the thread woven through the charts that way. It's not just a planet and a sign, and that's the whole chart. It's not quite that simple. So all right, let me start at the top. So the first house is Aries house. And like I said, there's nobody on the planet right now with Pluto and Aries, though there have been many famous people who've had Pluto and Aries. So if somebody goes back and does astro research, they're going to come across this. But there are certainly a lot of people with Pluto born in the first house. And this represents a new cycle of lessons. And the new cycle is true about any of the angular houses, the 4th house, 7th house, and 10th houses as well. Aries and the fire signs in general have a sense of special destiny. They feel that they have a special mission for being here, because the fire signs themselves is spirit, it's chi, it's life force, it's the actual birth process itself. So there is this sense of destiny and of specialness. But people with Pluto in the first house are experimenting. It's trial and error. Traditional astrology likes to categorize the ascendant and the first house as what we project. It's not a projection. It's total instinct. The first house is birth. We come into the world head first. We don't even know if somebody's going to be there to catch us. We don't think about it. There's no forethought except to just be. So Pluto in the first house are people who are learning about themselves with different paths. They're experimenting, and as such, they need a lot of independence. They're very independent people in order to have and achieve that freedom of self-discovery. Okay.
That makes sense.
All right. The second house is Taurus's house. And it's about self-reliance and self-sufficiency because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is what's important to us. It's our priorities. It's where we find meaning. But in Taurus, Venus is in her inner expression, which is our relationship to ourself. So it's about that self-reliance, the self-sufficiency, and it's a focus on physical and biological survival. It's why it becomes sex and procreation. And it's the search for where is my meaning, what's really essential to me. And, meaning, for some people that's money, for some people it's relationship, a job, power. For some person, the meaning is finding the teacher who can take them through new spiritual experiences. So it's different for everybody. But overall, it's identifying what our own essential resources are from our individual perspective. Okay?
Yeah, I like that. Okay.
All right. The third house is Gemini and Mercury. And here, and I should back up a minute, each of the houses, is yang and yin in sequence. So Aries is a projection outward, and we come into the world. Taurus is an inward energy. We look inward to find our resources. Gemini is outward again. And it's where we look outward into our environment. And the security, Pluto's security here, becomes understanding our environment from an intellectual perspective. We name things. We have language. We communicate. We connect intellectually with what's around us. Very Gemini. Facts, information, data. Okay, and it's where we find our voice. Generally, Pluto in the third house is someone who has had experience. Either their voice has been too loud or their voice has been too soft.
So they could be learning a balance with that, right?
Well, it's always about balance. Yeah. Yes, we have to walk both sides of the street. We have to walk up and down, back and forth, forwards and backwards, sideways and upside down. We have to experience it every different way. So in the fourth house, again, it's a new phase. It's a new evolutionary cycle. It's cardinal. And here we're in the moon's house. We're in Cancer. So it's learning the evolutionary lesson of security from an emotional perspective. It's finding our own emotional self-reliance. Where Taurus was self-reliance in terms of our resources, the fourth house Pluto becomes self-reliance in terms of our own emotions, not needing somebody else to validate our emotions, not depending on someone else emotionally for our sense of security, to be secure in ourselves. Okay. Does this make sense so far?
Kind of foundational. Yeah, which is interesting because I always look at fourth house as a foundation, so that's kind of having a good foundation that's not dependent on something outside oneself.
Well, foundation is absolutely correct because it's our emotional body. It's our inner guidance system, and we are emotional creatures. We're here. There's such a common New Age meme that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and I think we often forget that we're here for that human experience, and it's through our emotions that we have those experiences.
I love that you say that, and I think that's a big part of the awakening that's taking place. Is we're here on this earth plane for emotional experiences. We're Earth. We are emotional beings. We have the emotional body is very important. Not something to be shunned. And moved away from.
Right. Yeah. Right. No, the moon is our actually most conscious part, Michele. It's our moment to moment. It's our moment to moment interaction with the world. we may have thoughts, Mercury, Mars, our behavior, but it's through the moon that we experience everything. That's our moment-to-moment interface.
Okay, like that. Wow.
All right, so the fifth house, we're in Leo's house, and here we're yang again, we're outward. And the moon is our ego. Again, I'll back up again a little bit, because the moon is our moon in each lifetime is the egocentric structure that the soul constructs that contains its entire emotional history. It's our ego, and ego is not a bad word. If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't know our name. We wouldn't. It's our focus. So in the fifth house, we take that self-image, that self-discovery that we're working with, and that becomes the personality that we project out into the world. And Leo again is a fire sign. It's that sense of special purpose, of special destiny. But in Leo, the ego is inflated to its max. It's the balloon that's blown up so big that the smallest little pinprick will burst it. The fifth house, Leo is a pyramid where Leo sees itself at the very tip of the pyramid and everything is beneath it. It's a very extroverted but very often inflated. Kind of full of itself, can be very full of itself archetype. Mm-hmm. That all reverses. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, so in the fifth, are they learning again the balance of the ego, or learning self-expression?
Yes, they're learning. They're learning to take what they have discovered through their own emotional experience in Cancer, and to actually be that in the world, to project that as our personality. In EA, the sun actually, the sun is the center of our solar system. It's where the life force comes to us, from the universe. But from an EA, it's the last planet in a sense that I look at, because everything is funneled through the sun. All the way we think, the way we act, our emotions all get funneled through our personality. It's like an extrusion. It's like the molten metal that gets forced through a mold. The Leo and the fifth house are that mold, that shape, that form that all of that energy takes. Mm-hmm. In the sixth house, in the sixth house, there's a whole reversal, because the sixth house is Virgo. And this is where the balloon gets popped. The lesson of the sixth house is learning humility, because the sixth house and the 12th house, when I get to it, are thresholds. Everything from the first house to the fifth house is very personal. It's subjective. It's us. It's just me. When we get to the sixth house, we actually encounter others for the first time. We're not yet in a relationship. That's the seventh house in Libra. But we contrast ourselves with them. And in that contrast, we have the experiences of humility. And the pyramid gets turned upside down, where we actually become the bottom of the pyramid. And because we need to be refined and purified in order to be in a social sphere, to be able to be with other people. We can't be that full-blown, full of ourselves Leo. We have to be deflated. We have to find some humility and balance, so that we can be in a social setting, in a social context. So, and it's Mercury, so it involves a lot of self-analysis, self-work on the self, and it's often growth through crisis. It's often growth through crisis. In the seventh house again is cardinal, so we have a new phase, and this is where we form relationships with other people. But again, it's self-discovery. It's Aries polarity. So here is Aries finding itself in the mirror of others, in the mirror of relationship, where the relationships themselves and the social context, and learning how to listen to somebody else rather than just hearing our own inner voice, helps us to, again, perfect ourselves and to balance ourselves so that we can be more holistic, we can be more whole.
Yeah, so it's interesting that in this, I love talking about this, Daniel, because it's like there's a lot of this, inner process, and then a time to take it outer, or when you're looking up to, like you said, to the sixth house, where it starts, focusing more on the other, what we've learned, and then kind of like you said, the bubble or the balloon popped and humility coming in. It's almost like in the beginning you're really shaped and formed to a certain degree, a certain level of confidence comes in. But if it's not refined, as you say, on the 6th house, that beginning on, and then the 7th, then we wouldn't be able to get it, it would be over, ego-eccentric,
Exactly. We wouldn't be able to be with other people. Nobody would have anything to do with us. It's quite simple. We would be excluded. Nobody would invite us to a party. I mean, life would not be any fun.
Right. Wow.
So,
okay.
We need relationships. So that's the refinement. But when we enter that 7th house, we have crossed the threshold because now we're entering a transpersonal realm. Now we're out with the social context, and it's not just about me. Now it's about me and you.
Okay, so we have Tamara in the chat. Wait, what is 7th house? Okay.
7th house is where we enter into relationship because the relationships become the mirror of self, where we learn who we are and who we are not. And we can develop our own self in that mirror. We're actually looking in a mirror, because the 7th house is that projection. The 1st house isn't a projection. The 7th house is where we project ourselves into the relationship, and then we see what comes back.
Mm. So really, that 7th house, like you said, you're getting that. Finding oneself in the mirror of others. There's a lot more about the others, whether through projection or reflection, perception. But that's where that dance sounds like, Daniel, starts to be about, not just us, right?
I missed that word. That what starts? The D word?
Well, the dance, the
dance.
Perception was my perception, projection, the mirroring. It is about the other. I'm not just in this by myself,
Exactly.
So, I like that.
Yes. Yeah. That's when we begin to realize that there's a collective out there. It's not just us. Okay, so in the 8th house, if the 7th house is the dating game, so to speak, the 8th house is the house of sacred marriage. This is where we make the commitment. The 8th and 2nd are polarity, Taurus and Scorpio. So 2nd house was our own essential resources, what we brought with us, the gifts that we have innately within us to survive. In the 8th house, we learn who we are and who we are not and who we cannot be. And it's where we are attracted or drawn to those resources outside of ourselves that we recognize also as being essential, but they have to come from somebody else. So it could be a person, it could be an idea, it could be a place. For me, it was evolutionary astrology. When I first found evolutionary astrology, I was drawn to it like a moth to a flame, because it was something that I knew that I needed essentially as a resource, but I didn't have it in me yet. And I osmosed it. Scorpio is osmosis. I totally made it my own. It no longer was something external to me. I made a total commitment to it and merged. That's what happens in the 8th house of merge, and that's the house of marriage. That's the difference between dating somebody and going to a movie and actually living with them for 25 years. It's a commitment. Right?
It's like deeper commitment, right? Deeper commitment, even deeper emotional commitment.
It's a spiritual, mental. It's a commitment on all levels. Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's also in Scorpio in the 8th house where our challenges come up, and again, because we're hitting a wall in a sense of ourself. So we are coming up against the limitations that are in this lifetime, the challenges that we need to overcome, and it's why it's so challenging, and it's why Pluto can be so difficult, because we're hitting a wall. We're hitting a wall. We're hitting the choices that were either denied to us or we chose to back burner, et cetera, that we didn't work on previously, or the limitations that we have not overcome.
Love that. 9th house.
All right, so in the 9th house, we're in Sagittarius and Jupiter's world. And Jupiter is all about the search for truth. It's about understanding life in a cosmological, metaphysical, philosophical, perhaps religious context. And it's the need to explain our connection to the nature of the universe and our world in the broadest sense. It's why travel is associated with it, because when we travel, we experience other food, other customs, the way that people dress, they speak, that are totally different than where we came from, and we have another whole perspective on reality. We have a total contrast to what we think is true. And so it represents that search for truth. However, Sagittarius and Jupiter are still a relative truth. It's still, it becomes the proselytizing, priest. We think that our truth is still the whole truth and the only truth, and the reality of it is just generally just a piece of the truth. But it's the search for those answers, and it's the quest. To understand that, the beliefs and ideas, it's our belief system. Jupiter in the chart represents what we need to believe in order to be who we are. And if you think about that, and you just apply it to our, I don't want to get political here, but if you just think about it in terms of all the political candidates right now, you'll see how it works.
Yeah, boy, that's the truth. Yes. Yes. Wow.
Okay.
Powerful. Clubhouse. Yes.
All right. So in the 10th house, we're in Saturn and Capricorn's world, and Saturn is structure. Saturn is structure. Saturn is gravity. It's weight. It carries some heavy reputation. Its reputation is not. Its reality is not as bad as its reputation, because it brings a structure. And sometimes that structure is painful. It's like all the women who tried to fit into Cinderella's shoe. I mean, they were going to get their shoe in there, but it just didn't fit. Right. But it's a way to look at it. It's the consensus that we agree to, and we need some consensus. We have to stop at a red light. We don't kill people. We don't steal. I mean, there's certain things we have to agree to live together. But there are also, consensus extends into a range of man-made laws and customs and taboos that we don't necessarily agree with, that maybe there's somebody's personal agenda, coming out of that Sagittarian 9th house that's their version of the truth. So, in the 10th house, it is society. And what happens in the 10th house is where we learn to integrate our own philosophy, our own beliefs within the framework of society, of a culture, and either conform or don't conform or struggle with it. But this is what goes on there, because this is Saturn. The 10th house is consensus reality, the taboos and customs, and it's how we relate to all that or don't relate to it.
So there could be lessons of learning to either not to conform too much, or do we need to conform, or how do we fit in, fitting in perhaps?
Or we're carrying karmic vestiges of having to fit in and how it didn't work. So it can work, the shadow, we're looking, and because Saturn, it can be suppression, repression, depression. So, it can carry all those qualities as well. It's authority, and it's how do we deal with authority, and how in the past has authority dealt with us.
Yeah. Now, I've always thought the 10th house would be outward, right?
No.
Oh,
no, it's yin. No, it's yin.
Oh, it's yin. Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
So the 11th house, we move into Aquarius and Uranus's realm. And Uranus is the deconditioning. Uranus is where we begin to strip away all those layers of the beliefs that our parents and our peers and our culture and our religion and our nation and, all of that has overlaid on us. We're onions, with many layers. I call it karmic trail dust. All the conditioning that we've picked up, not only in this lifetime, but in all the lifetimes before, the things that somebody else, the ethical judgments that were laid upon us that we have taken to believe as, are true, or we've taken them on as our own. And Uranus strips away that stuff. Uranus wants us to be individuals. They don't want us to be part of a herd mentality. We're not really, all of us are the same under the skin, but we're not all the same. Every one of us is an individual. Every one of us has a unique frequency. And, in consensus, that's squelched. That's kind of stepped on. And Uranus is that individuation process itself. And anything that shows up in the 11th house is there to be deconditioned.
Maybe that's why I don't like herd mentality. I like people to be unique and blended groups and not over-identify.
Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then the 12th?
Okay,
and we'll carry on just a little bit till we, Okay. Yeah, and if anybody has questions, let me do 12th, and we'll take some questions if there are any. I've got two screens here in my notes, so I'm not really watching the chat board, so you'll have to keep me updated. I'm watching it. I'm watching it.
The 12th house, is Pisces' house. This is Neptune's house, and this is the culmination and composite of all the other signs and planets and houses. Someone who has Pluto in the 12th house has experienced all of the other archetypes. It's given them the sense of compassion and sense of forgiveness and understanding, because through their own journey, soul journey, they have experienced all those other archetypes. They know what it's like to be an Aries, what it's like to be a Taurus, what it's like to be a Cancer, etc., right down the line. And in the 12th house, we become aware of the unity of all creation. And to see and experience our own individuality, 11th house, as an extension of the source of all that is. And it's the desire and the need to seek and to seek and realize values and beliefs and knowledge that transcend time and space. Time and space is Saturn, but this Neptune is outside of time and space. It's where our higher self is. It's the ocean, not the wave, and we can come back to that analogy. It's the values where we transcend the values in the culture in which we're born into, where we find universal laws, natural law, as opposed to man-made law, and we start to integrate it into our lives and live according to it. It's not religion, so to speak. The Neptune and Pisces can be religion, but in its highest expression, it's beyond religion. It's not anything that's tied to the sense of right and wrong and the pain and the savior or martyr kind of stuff that goes on. It's outside of all that.
So it's really getting into that transcendent or transpersonal part of learning that, integrating and learning that. Let's see. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Daniel. We got people thinking in the chat. I'll just listen to the archive. Yeah, awesome info. Thank you for being here. So we got people humming in the chat. I guess we'll have to have you back again because now we're out of time. This gives an overview. It really does. And you said at the top of the program that it really is a soul perspective. And as you were giving these synopsises, I was thinking it really does speak to the soul and this whole idea of a soul journey or soul growth here, learning soul expression, that there is this focus on learning, really, evolving, I guess, growth.
Well, isn't that why we're here?
I think a big part, growth, expression, experience, evolving. And to be more of who we really are, on a soul level, I would say yes, absolutely.
And what's important to understand, and this is often hard, and this was a hard one for me, Michele, is to understand that wherever somebody is in their journey, wherever somebody is on the spectrum, they may need that big fancy car. They may need to be the president of the company. They may need to be the loudest voice on the block or something. They need that experience, and until they fulfill that desire, Pluto are those desires.
Right.
We have to fulfill it. I call it the law of saturation. We have to saturate ourselves with the experience. When we stuff that desire, that's when the distortions start. And that's part of what's wrong with our culture, because things like sexual liberation has been so repressed that it's created all the distortions, surrounding it. And it all comes from that Virgo Pisces martyr savior, ethical judgment with sin and hell and heaven. It's all wound up, and it creates the imbalances and the distortion. What we're coming through is a time when we're beginning to see through this, and we're beginning to understand that we have to move past all of it, but there's still plenty of it out there that it still isn't saturated. So it's we just have to go with the flow and just do the work on ourselves and just do whatever we can to bring as much consciousness into our world as we can in any way that we can.
Mm-hmm. So getting out of that extreme polarity of the, kind of hero, victim, savior, victim, out of that Piscean, on an evolutionary astrology standpoint, what are we learning now? What's the outpicturing, I guess? That's
a good question, and off the top of my head, I don't know that I can identify a single thing. I think it's always love, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it's learning. For some people, it's learning to stand in their power. For other people, it's learning to speak their truth. For other people, it's learning to open their heart. There are many parts of the soul, if you would. And we have to learn. For some people, it's learning to honor their emotions. For others, it's learning to honor the others. For some people, it's learning to love themselves. I mean, we each have a different lesson, and it's all part of the same journey. But it's a composite picture. It's a hologram. There's no single lesson that I think we can identify. But as a hologram, it's the unity and the balance that we all need moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think on that note, we're going to, and we've gone over a little bit, which has been great, and I appreciate you taking the time. You'll have to come back again. We'll continue. There's so much here.
I'd love to.
Great. And Tamara in the chat saying great sharing. So a lot of people are listening by phone or computer right now. We've been talking with evolutionary astrologer Daniel Fiverson. You can find out more information about him, his personal work, healing work, and astrology readings that he does at forevolutionaryastrology.com, and that's the number 4, evolutionaryastrology.com. Daniel, thanks so much for being here. This has been great. Really, really loved having you back on the program and loved the insight and information that you shared with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Michele.
Thank you all for being here. This has been, I'm glad that some of you could stay by phone and computer. I don't know if you can hear by chat. Yeah, you can't hear anymore by the chat, but you definitely can phone. Well worth a listen on the archives. Lots more information. It's been a great program. I really enjoyed today. And thank you all those that called in, all of you holding down the fort in the chat, anchoring this wonderful energy that we all are. Have a sparkly rest of the week and weekend, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday, right? I think so. I'll be here. I hope you'll be here. And for all things Awakenings, guest suggestions, topic suggestions, questions you want answered on air, you can email me at awakeningspodcast@gmail.com or awakeningsradio@gmail.com. You can go to soulentrpreneurship.life for information on the group program. Selfenlight.com has a lot of resources, and, of course, dailyom.com. Navigate your great soul shift as well. And join me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Let's connect. Let's share. You're free to post whatever you'd like to on my pages. And, let's keep the connection going. All right, everyone. Have a great, great rest of your Wednesday. Have a sparkly weekend, and I'll see you next week. Lots of love and light.
Awakenings broadcasts every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Time. Archive shows are available on iTunes. For continued Awaken conversation and insights, join the Awakenings group on Facebook and visit Michele's blog at soulinsightsforspiritledliving.com. That's Soul Insights, the number 4, spiritledliving.com. Keep awake.
Sometimes diabetes can feel more like don't-abetes. Don't do this, don't forget that. But with a little help from Walgreens, diabetes won't slow you down. Stop by to get expert pharmacy advice 24/7 and savings on medications and supplies. You can even get rewarded for healthy behaviors like logging your glucose. Walgreens has just what you need to do more with diabetes. Walgreens, at the corner of happy and healthy.
Limitations apply. For full program terms and conditions, visit walgreens.com/healthychoices.